In the frozen forests of Eastern Europe, the wind-scoured ridgelines of Italy, and the rain-soaked hedgerows of northwest Europe, millions of soldiers learned a hard truth very quickly. Cold kills faster than bullets when clothing fails. World War II was not fought in laboratories or controlled environments. It was fought in mud, sleet, and prolonged exposure, where resupply was uncertain and movement was constant. In that setting, armies did not rely on marketing claims or comfort trends. They relied on materials that worked under abuse. One of the most overlooked examples is the humble wool insert, the removable liners used in boots, gloves, parkas and trousers. These inserts were not primitive stopgaps. They were carefully chosen components that, in many real-world conditions, outperform modern thermal underwear that dominates today's outdoor industry. How wartime conditions shaped a brutally honest approach to insulation. Military quartermasters in the 1930s and 1940s judged clothing by outcomes, not theory. If soldiers developed trench foot, frostbite or hypothermia, the system failed. Wool inserts emerged because armies needed insulation that functioned when wet, compressed dirty, and worn continuously. Unlike modern thermals designed for dry, intermittent use, wool inserts were meant to stay on the body for days. They were issued not as fashion layers, but as modular components that could be added, removed, dried, and reused without replacing the entire garment. What World War II wool inserts actually were in practical terms. Wool inserts were thick felted or loosely piled wool layers sewn or fitted inside boots, mittens, trousers and coats. German felt boot liners, Soviet Valenki inserts, British battle dress liners, and American M1943 Parker wool components all followed the same principle. Now, the wool back then was not the soft merino you might find on the shelves today. It was actually a much coarser, high lanolin fibre, and quite often it was blended for extra durability. The inserts, you see, trapped air in 3 dimensions, rather than just relying on those thin, knit structures. This, created insulation that could resist collapse, even under pressure from body weight, pack straps, or, tight footwear. So, why does wool behave so differently from modern synthetic thermals? That's a question worth exploring. Modern thermal underwear, it relies on moisture wicking and tight body contact. The whole idea is that sweat will be moved away from the skin and evaporated. But in prolonged cold and wet conditions, evaporation just becomes impossible. The moisture stays trapped, and, synthetic fibres lose their insulation rapidly when they're compressed or saturated. Wool behaves differently, Wool fibres absorb moisture internally while remaining dry on the surface. Even when damp, wool continues to insulate. During World War II, inserts exploited this property by allowing moisture to move into the fibre rather than pooling against the skin. So, why do inserts outperform full garments in sustained cold? Well, it's mainly because inserts manage moisture and insulation more effectively, especially over long periods. The insert system separated insulation from the outer shell. This allowed soldiers to dry wool liners near fires, swap them out, or adjust layers without removing protective outer clothing. In contrast, modern thermal underwear is trapped beneath multiple layers, making drying difficult without full undressing. Wool inserts could be aired, beaten or rotated. This modularity reduced cold injuries dramatically, especially in those Eastern Front campaigns where, both German and Soviet medical reports repeatedly emphasized liner management over just adding more layers. Now, how compression resistance gave wool a decisive advantage. Compression destroys insulation. Modern thermals, they lose effectiveness under tight boots, belts or body armour. World War II wool inserts were thick enough to resist this flattening. Felted wool rebounds after compression, restoring those all-important air pockets. This is why wool boot inserts remained warm even after hours of marching. Modern thin thermals, by contrast, often become little more than damp fabric once compressed. How soldiers applied this knowledge in the field. Veterans' accounts repeatedly describe removing wool inserts at night, drying them under coats or near low heat, then reinserting them before movement. Some soldiers layered newspaper between wool and shell to increase dead air space, relying on the wool to manage moisture. Others use spare inserts as chest warmers or seat insulation. This adaptability mattered. Wool inserts were tools, not passive garments. Why modern outdoor clothing moved away from this system. Post-war manufacturing favoured lightweight, low-cost synthetics and simplified sizing. Thermal underwear could be sold as a single solution rather than a system. Marketing emphasized comfort and athletic movement rather than survival under neglect. Wool inserts require care, rotation, and understanding. They assume the user participates in the system. That mindset, faded as outdoor clothing became recreational rather than functional. How this knowledge applies today for serious users. Cold weather hikers, bushcrafters and expedition workers who reintroduce wool liners into boots or mittens often report warmer extremities with less sweat build-up. Using removable wool insoles, glove liners or vest inserts, it recreates the World War II approach. The key is thickness, airflow and separation from the shell. Wool should not be skin-tight. It should create a buffer zone that manages moisture while retaining structure. Why World War II wool inserts remain, an honest benchmark. These inserts were tested by, millions of unwilling participants across every climate imaginable. They were refined not by opinion, but honestly by casualty rates. They represent a material solution aligned with reality rather than a comfort ideology. Modern thermals certainly have their place, but when exposure is prolonged and conditions really deteriorate, wool inserts continue to perform with a reliability that, frankly, modern systems struggle to match. If you value historical solutions that truly earned their reputation under pressure, then this is exactly the kind of knowledge Relic Logic exists to preserve. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more deep examinations of overlooked wartime technologies. And, well, share this episode with anyone who believes the past still holds answers modern design has forgotten.